How can a civilization with immense wealth, deep faith, and nearly 2 billion people still look so politically weak, so divided, and so unsure of its future? And what if the biggest danger was never outside the gates, but inside the house all along? Before we go further, like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who is tired of slogans and ready for an honest conversation. On paper, the Muslim world should be one of the most powerful forces on earth. It stretches across continents. It sits on critical trade routes. It holds vast energy reserves. It has some of the youngest populations in the world. It has ancient cities, living traditions, huge markets, and millions of intelligent, capable young people who want a better life. If you looked only at resources, population, and geography, you might expect a civilizational comeback story. You might expect confidence. You might expect stability. You might expect serious influence. But that is not what much of the world sees. What it sees instead is a painful contradiction. It sees countries rich in oil and gas, yet full of jobless graduates. It sees states with beautiful skylines, yet weak institutions. It sees military power without long-term security. It sees talent leaving. It sees anger rising. It sees too many people trapped between pride in their identity and despair about their future. And that is what makes this conversation so difficult. Because the easiest story is also the most comforting one. The easiest story says the problem is mainly the West, mainly colonialism, mainly sanctions, mainly foreign conspiracies, mainly outsiders. Now, let's be honest. Outside powers have caused real damage. Colonial borders were reckless. Invasions were catastrophic. Foreign meddling has been cynical and destructive. None of that should be denied. But if that becomes the only explanation, then it becomes a shield. It becomes a way to never ask the most dangerous question of all. What if the deepest wounds are self-inflicted? This is not an attack on Islam as a faith, and it should not be heard that way. Faith did not create broken ministries, stolen budgets, silenced scholars, or jobless graduates. Human choices did, political systems did, power networks did, repeated bad incentives did. And until that difference is understood clearly, people will keep defending the very structures that are suffocating them. So in this video, we are going to walk through 7 self-inflicted mistakes that have held back large parts of the Muslim world. Not every country is the same. Not every society made the same choices. Not every government failed in the same way. But these patterns appear again and again, and together they help explain why so much potential has turned into frustration. We start with the mistake that feels emotionally satisfying, and we end with the one that may decide the future itself. The 7th mistake is blaming outsiders for everything. This one is powerful because it contains just enough truth to survive. Yes, foreign powers interfered. Yes, empires carved up lands and extracted wealth. Yes, major powers still pressure weaker states when it suits them. But when every broken school, every failed hospital, every corrupt ministry, every empty factory, and every stolen election is explained only by outside enemies, something dangerous happens. Responsibility disappears. A government that can keep people angry at foreign villains can often avoid being judged for domestic failure. It can say, do not look at the budget, look at the old empire. Do not look at who stole the money, look at the foreign plot. Do not ask why your degree is worthless, why your electricity fails, why your courts are weak, or why your city floods after one storm. Just stay angry at someone far away. That story is politically cheap and emotionally effective. It gives people a target. It gives leaders cover. And it creates a culture where outrage becomes a substitute for reform. It is far easier to chant about humiliation than to redesign a tax system. It is far easier to speak about historical betrayal than to build an honest civil service. Real progress is boring. It needs paperwork, discipline, transparency, contract enforcement, local competence, and patient institution building. Blame needs none of that. And here is the hidden cost. A society trained to explain failure mainly through outsiders often stops training itself to solve failure from within. Young people become skilled at repeating grievances, but not at diagnosing systems. Public conversation becomes dramatic but shallow. The emotional energy is real, yet it is spent in circles. Decades pass, speeches get louder, results get worse. You can see the difference when countries choose another path. States with no oil, no huge population, and no civilizational glory have still climbed by focusing on education, rule of law, export capacity, anti-corruption systems, and institutional trust. They did not waste their lives waiting for perfect justice from history. They moved anyway. That does not erase colonial harm. It proves that history is not destiny. At some point, a nation must decide not whether memory will guide it or imprison it. The 6th mistake is punishing questions. This may be the most underrated disaster of all because it destroys a society quietly before it collapses publicly. In too many places, asking the wrong question can cost a person a career, freedom, reputation, or even life. A journalist investigates a contract and suddenly becomes a traitor. A professor challenges an official narrative and suddenly becomes dangerous. An economist warns that debt is becoming unsustainable and suddenly becomes disloyal. A citizen asks why a policy failed and is told that criticism itself is the problem. When this becomes normal, the entire system loses the ability to correct itself. Think about what questions really do in a healthy society. Questions reveal cracks early. Questions test false claims. Questions force leaders to justify decisions. Questions allow reality to enter the room. But when fear replaces truth, reality does not disappear. It just waits. It waits inside the banking system. It waits inside the crumbling bridge. It waits inside the unpaid debt, the manipulated exam system, the failing water network, the empty medicine shelf. And when it finally arrives, it arrives as a crisis. This is why repression is not merely a moral problem. It is a practical disaster. A state that cannot tolerate criticism cannot learn. A bureaucracy that only rewards obedience will hide errors until they become catastrophes. A minister surrounded by praise becomes blind. A ruler who hears only loyalty speeches will mistake silence for stability. But silence is often fear, and fear is not order. Fear is delayed chaos. It also poisons knowledge itself. Good research needs freedom. Serious innovation needs disagreement. Honest education needs room for doubt, testing, revision, and correction. You do not get scientific depth by telling people what conclusions are safe before they begin thinking. You do not get world-class universities by turning classrooms into zones of caution. You do not build an innovation economy when bright minds know the safest career path is not truth, but silence. And once fear shapes public life, investors feel it too. Money does not love uncertainty. It does not love arbitrary power. It does not love systems where a law can be applied selectively, a contract can be reversed because the wrong person got offended, or a business can be ruined because it lacks political protection. So the capital that could build factories, labs, and companies moves elsewhere. It goes where the rules are clearer and where asking basic questions is not treated like rebellion. If this conversation is already pushing you to rethink old narratives, pause for 1 second, tap, like, subscribe, and send this video to one person who values honesty more than comfortable myths. The fifth mistake is sidelining women and then wondering why the economy remains weak. This is one of the clearest examples of self-sabotage because the loss is visible, measurable, and repeated year after year. Across many Muslim-majority societies, women are educated in large numbers. In some places, they outperform men in schools and universities. Families invest in them. They study medicine, engineering, law, teaching, science, management, and technology. They carry ambition. They carry discipline. They carry skill. And then too often, the system blocks them right when they are ready to contribute. Sometimes the barrier is legal. Sometimes it is social. Sometimes it is institutional. Sometimes it is all three at once. A woman may need permission, protection, transportation, special family approval, social negotiation, or extraordinary persistence just to do what a man is assumed to do by default. Even where the law improves, workplace culture may remain hostile. Even where the workplace opens, childcare support may remain weak. Even where education expands, real economic inclusion may lag far behind. The result is absurd. Nations spend years educating half their talent pool and then use only part of it. That is not tradition protecting society. That is society reducing its own power. Imagine an airline choosing to fly with one engine and then acting surprised when it cannot keep up with competitors. Imagine a football club training half its team and then refusing to put them on the field. That is what many economies have done for decades. And the damage does not stop at income. When women are economically weaker, families become more financially fragile. When women have less access to work and mobility, entire communities lose resilience. When professional women are blocked, younger girls receive a message before anyone even says it out loud: your effort may not lead to freedom. That message shapes dreams. It shapes family decisions. It shapes marriage timing, fertility patterns, career risk, and social confidence. Now again, this is not a problem everywhere in the same way. Some countries have improved sharply. Some reforms have moved fast. In several places, once restrictions loosened, female employment rose and business activity expanded. That is the point. This is not fate. It is policy. It is culture. It is choice, which means it can change. But until it changes at scale, many states will keep weakening themselves while pretending they are protecting themselves. The fourth mistake is choosing endless internal conflict. This is where the cost becomes unbearable because here the losses are not only economic. They are human, generational, and sometimes irreversible. Over the last few decades, many of the worst disasters across the Muslim world were not simple battles against foreign occupation. They were civil wars, proxy wars, factional struggles, sectarian wars, militia rule, and state collapse from within. Look at what that actually means in real life. It means cities that take decades to build and days to destroy. It means families split across borders. It means children growing up with drones overhead or militias at checkpoints. It means parents who stop thinking about success and start thinking only about survival. It means trauma becoming normal. It means a child learning the sound of shelling before the feel of a classroom routine. War does not only kill in the moment, it reaches into the future and steals from people who are not even born yet. A bomb can destroy a road in seconds, but the missing road affects commerce for years. A war can shut a school for a season, but the lost learning follows a generation into adulthood. A hospital destroyed in one strike becomes years of untreated illness, weaker labor, lower trust, and deeper despair. Every conflict claims land, but it also claims time, and nations rarely recover the time they lose. What makes this even more tragic is that these same decades could have been used differently. Other nations facing hardship invested in industry, technical education, logistics, manufacturing, energy systems, and export strategy. They turned vulnerability into discipline. But too many states across this region turned fear into permanent militarization, or let rival factions burn the national house down to settle elite struggles. Even where leaders spoke in the language of resistance or dignity, the outcome was often rubble, dependence, and exhaustion. And once war enters a country, almost every other problem becomes worse. Corruption becomes easier to hide, education becomes harder to maintain, investment disappears, skilled people flee, sectarian identities harden, armed groups learn that violence works, young men with no future discover that a gun pays faster than a degree. In that environment, peace is not just a treaty. Peace becomes a whole cultural and economic reconstruction project. And many governments are not prepared for that work. The third mistake is driving away the most capable people. No civilization survives long when it exports its best minds and then acts shocked that innovation stays weak at home. Across many Muslim-majority countries, talented people study hard, earn credentials, dream big, and then look around and see the same walls. Weak institutions, nepotism, political limits, poor research funding, low salaries, broken career ladders, arbitrary power. So they leave. The young doctor leaves because the hospital system is underfunded and promotion depends on connections. The engineer leaves because merit is secondary to relationships. The entrepreneur leaves because licenses, capital, and protection go to insiders. The researcher leaves because the lab is outdated, grants are tiny, and intellectual freedom is uncertain. The software developer leaves because the ecosystem is too narrow. The artist leaves because expression is too risky. The honest civil servant leaves because honesty is too lonely. And once this starts, it feeds itself. The very people needed to improve the country become the people most likely to escape it. Which means the system becomes even more dominated by the mediocre, the loyal, the protected, and the politically connected. The talent gap widens. The next generation sees fewer role models who stayed and succeeded honestly. Hope drops. Exit becomes the ambition. This is one of the cruelest forms of national loss because the investment was already made. These people were educated at home. Their families sacrificed for them. Public resources helped train them. Their schools, teachers, communities, and parents all contributed. Then, just when society should collect the return, another country receives it. Another country gets the doctor, the engineer, the scientist, the founder, the professor, the systems thinker, the specialist. Of course, migration itself is not evil. People have the right to seek a better life. Many migrants do amazing things abroad and support families back home. The problem is not movement. The problem is what forces the movement. If leaving becomes the most rational decision for the ambitious, then something is deeply wrong in the home system. A healthy country may lose some talent, but it also attracts, retains, and renews talent. A failing one becomes a launch pad for permanent departure. And here is the deeper danger. Money can be rebuilt. Buildings can be rebuilt. Even armies can be rebuilt. But when a country spends 30 years telling its brightest people, indirectly but clearly, that they are more valued elsewhere, the damage sinks into national psychology. It teaches children that home is for memory, not possibility. It teaches adults that patriotism is emotional, but success is geographic. Once a nation starts believing that, decline becomes self-reinforcing. If this story is hitting harder than you expected, save the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it now, because the final two mistakes connect everything we have talked about and raise the stakes even higher. The second mistake is allowing public wealth to be captured by private circles. People often call this corruption, but in many cases, corruption is too small a word. A bribe is one thing, a system designed so that contracts, land, licenses, energy revenues, import privileges, state banks, and strategic sectors are controlled by connected families, military networks, party insiders, or palace-adjacent elites is something larger. That is extraction. That is organized national weakness. This is where ordinary citizens begin to feel the system is not merely flawed, but rigged. They work, but inflation eats their savings. They study, But jobs go to insiders. They pay, but services remain poor. They obey, but others seem exempt from rules. They are told to sacrifice, but the people making the speeches grow richer. And once that perception becomes common, trust starts to rot. Trust matters more than many leaders understand. Economies do not run only on money. They run on belief. Belief that effort can matter. Belief that contracts will hold. Belief that the court will not simply protect the powerful. Belief that a new business has a fair chance. Belief that taxes are not just tribute for a class above the law. When that belief dies, ambition changes. People stop thinking long term. They hide money, they avoid risk, they build escape plans, not companies. This is why resource wealth can become a curse when institutions are weak. Oil, gas, ports, minerals, and state-owned assets can create huge revenue without requiring broad accountability. Leaders do not need to build a healthy tax relationship with society if they can fund themselves through extraction. That weakens the social contract. Instead of citizens feeling like stakeholders, they begin to feel like spectators watching their national inheritance pass through someone else's hands. And the tragedy is not only what gets stolen, it is what never gets built because of the theft. The school that was never finished, the research center that was never funded, the power grid that remained unreliable, the housing project that became a shell, the transit system delayed for years, the credit that went to a loyal insider instead of a skilled entrepreneur, the small business that died because the market was cornered. Corruption is not just lost money, it is lost possibility. This also explains why cynicism becomes so deep. People can endure hardship when they believe the hardship is shared fairly and aimed at a real future. But when they watch luxury at the top and stagnation below, the emotional contract breaks. The state stops feeling like a common project and starts feeling like an occupying network wearing local clothes. That is when patriotism gets hollow. Flags remain, anthems remain, ceremonies remain, but the emotional bond weakens. And that brings us to the first mistake, the one that all the others eventually crush beneath their weight. The first mistake is wasting the youth. The Muslim world is one of the youngest parts of the planet. In theory, that should be an extraordinary advantage. A young society has energy, adaptability, labor, creativity, hunger, and speed. With the right schools, real jobs, serious institutions, and a functioning economy, youth can power decades of growth. It can transform a region. It can change history. But youth is only a gift if a system knows how to use it. If not, youth turns into pressure. A graduate without work does not remain a symbol of potential forever. Eventually, he becomes a symbol of failure. A young woman with skills and ambition but no channel for them does not stay hopeful forever. Eventually, frustration settles in. Multiply that by millions, and you do not have a demographic advantage. You have a national emergency. This is where all the earlier mistakes meet. Blame culture tells the young to stay angry instead of effective. Repression tells them to stay quiet instead of honest. Excluding women wastes half their collective power. War steals their stability. Brain drain steals mentors and opportunities. Corruption blocks entry points. And at the end of that chain stands a 22-year-old degree in hand, scrolling job postings that lead nowhere, watching the connected glide ahead, wondering whether the future exists anywhere nearby. That person matters more than any slogan, because the future of a nation is not decided in speeches alone. It is decided in the minds of millions of young people asking a private question: should I build my life here? When the answer becomes no, even silently, decline is already underway. Some leave physically, others leave mentally. They remain in the country, but emotionally detached from it. They do not trust it, invest in it, or believe in it. They wait, improvise, survive, and dream of somewhere else. This is why youth unemployment and underemployment are so dangerous. Idleness is not neutral. It affects dignity. It affects marriage. It affects family formation. It affects mental health. It affects political stability. It affects religion too, because when daily life becomes humiliation, people search for meaning, blame, belonging, and revenge in all kinds of places. A society that leaves millions of young people underused is not just losing output. It is gambling with social peace. And yet, this is still the point where change remains possible. Young populations can still become an advantage. Talent can still be mobilized. Women can still be included. Institutions can still be repaired. Schools can still improve. Capital can still be redirected from spectacle to substance. The future is not dead, but it cannot be rescued by denial. It cannot be rescued by endless speeches about enemies abroad, while enemies within continue to strangle reform. The hardest truth in this whole story is that many of these societies do not mainly suffer from a lack of faith, identity, pride, history, or human ability. They suffer from systems that convert strength into weakness. They take energy and turn it into resentment. They take intelligence and turn it into emigration. They take wealth and turn it into private fortunes. They take criticism and turn it into fear. They take youth and turn it into waiting. And that is why this issue is so emotionally charged. A foreign enemy can unite people, it can simplify reality, it can offer a clean villain, but internal failure is harder to face because it demands self-examination. It demands accountability. It demands that people separate loyalty to a civilization from loyalty to bad leadership. It demands that citizens stop confusing respect for religion with obedience to failed power structures. Those are not the same thing. In fact, treating them as the same thing may be one of the oldest tricks in the book. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with a difficult but necessary conclusion. Large parts of the Muslim world are not trapped because they lack resources. They are not trapped because their people are incapable. They are not trapped because their faith prevents excellence. They are trapped because too many societies handed power to systems that fear truth, punish merit, waste talent, centralize wealth, and consume the future one generation at a time. But it also leaves us with a reason not to give in to despair. If the problem were civilizational DNA, there would be no hope. If the problem were some fixed flaw in ordinary people, there would be no hope. If the problem were destiny, there would be no hope. But if the problem is made of incentives, institutions, policies, taboos, and repeated choices, then it can be changed by different choices. Painfully, slowly, unevenly, yes, but changed. Real renewal would not begin with louder pride. It would begin with honest diagnosis. It would begin when people stop asking only who harmed us and start asking who failed us, who blocked reform, who stole the future, who punished competence, who trained generations to confuse noise with strength. It would begin when the average young person can imagine success at home without needing a family connection, political protection, or a plane ticket. And that is the image I want to leave you with. Not a palace, not an oil field, not a speech. A young person sitting alone at night with a degree, a phone, a family depending on them, and 2 tabs open on the screen. One is a local job application that will probably go nowhere. The other is a Visa page. That quiet moment may tell you more about the future of the Muslim world than any summit, any parade, or any official statement ever could. If that young person chooses hope at home, the system still has a chance. If that young person chooses escape, the country loses twice, once in the present and once in the future. And if millions make that choice at the same time, history will not call it a mystery. It will call it what it was, a preventable collapse of trust. So the real battle is not only for territory, reputation, or pride. It is for credibility. It is for a future that people can believe in enough to build with their own lives. Without that, all the wealth in the ground means very little. Without that, flags wave over exhausted societies. Without that, the story stays the same. With it, everything changes. And now I want your answer. Which of these 7 mistakes does the most damage? Blame, silence, sidelining women, endless conflict, brain drain, corruption, or the wasting of youth? Drop your number 1 in the comments, hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs a harder, deeper conversation than the usual headlines that ever give them.